Hello and welcome to the Bar Studio School. I'm Oliver Bennett.
And I'm Laura Snook.
Today we are joined by Martin Grixoni, who is a Conservative Party member.
Could you please tell us a little bit about your background? I believe you're an ex-Marine.
I'm a former serving Royal Marine, that's correct, yes. Brought up here in Bath, but then joined up, although I was in the local TA actually as a private soldier for a while, selling push bikes in Walker Street, which was great after A-levels. And then I joined up, and was in that for 28 years. And so left about 10 years ago now.
So how did you go from being a Marine to then being involved in local politics?
That's a great question. I think having served my community or my government for many years, and a bit also subsequent to being in the Marines, and having always been interested in politics, I think this is a natural thing for me to end up doing. I'm a Bath lad, and it seemed the best place to do it. And I think if you've got an interest in people and you've got an interest in serving your community, then it's great to be able to do that through politics. Some people disagree, and I disagree with them.
Yeah. So how did you get into politics?
I have helped out in the Conservative Party at a couple of previous elections over in Wales. I volunteered to do it in Bath, but was living closer to Wales at the time. I had a base there because my mother's close to there. And so did that, and then got to know the people here locally, and an opportunity came up, and I had the relevant sort of interviews with folk, and they were happy that I stand for the Bathwick ward. So here I am.
Brilliant. So that question kind of leads on to the next question. So you're representing Bathwick. Mm-hmm. What are the most prominent issues within this ward?
Well, yes, that's a slightly difficult one. My aim is to knock on everyone's door, or on everyone's. I'm not going to be able to meet everyone. That would be just too hard. But I'm about 70% there now, and I think some people understandably are concerned over Brexit. At the same time, this is local politics, yeah. And so we have to deal with the local issues, and of course we have a view on that, and sometimes people are quite agitated on both sides of the argument. Bath is a more fairly much more Remain city, so it's unsurprising there's a few more that side, but there's on both sides. So with some people it's bringing them back into the local. If there's local issues, then there's things like the Cleveland Baths that are starting up there, the Sydney Gardens where we've got some good money in there, parking issues and transport issues. Less seagull issues up on the Bathwick Hill, but some people still talk about it.
Why did you decide to join the Conservative Party?
I think their range of policies, they're a broad church, and that's a phrase that's maybe a little bit overused at the moment. I think if you had everyone representing single issues, you'd have too many small parties, and that wouldn't be healthy, I don't think. And I think broadly, they represented the views that I was happy with in areas of their policy. One can argue it's a left and right thing. You have to be slightly careful with that. The left needs to balance out the right in some ways. So business pushing forward and making your economy work and so on, and then caring for your community. It shouldn't be a sort of binary thing like that. My view is you've got to, and you should have both sides in all political parties. Otherwise, it becomes not healthy.
Yeah.
What are your views on the Bath Clean Air Zone policy?
Yes, I was interested in that because I think we were compelled by the government in London to drop the clean air or make the clean air achieve a certain level, and there were various ways of doing that. And we, after a good feedback session from the local community, we decided that the C route was much better than the D route. In other words, cars were not included in that. It was an interesting difference in policies between the parties there, but our view was that if you didn't have a nice shiny car, why should you be penalised for travelling across the city if you've got some useful work? So therefore we've hopefully achieved a good compromise whereby we can provide a deterrent for some of the bigger lorries coming through. We can clean the air to hopefully the relevant level and not penalise people unfairly.
Yeah, because whilst the initial listening period was about there was a lot of upset over the fact that it did seem like poorer people were going to be punished because they couldn't buy the newer cars.
Exactly,
So,
I agree, and I think politicians should be there to listen and not be dogmatic about what they want or some sort of hideband over a policy. So yeah, you have to listen to folk. You won't necessarily always agree with them. You know, people are there to represent people, not to be. It's an age-old quote, not to be slaves to their opinion. Because even I've experienced that out on the doorstep. There's a lot of diverging opinion, and so you have to listen to all, and then you, with experience, you can come to a considered view. And if you're looking after your community well, you'll then be happy to represent that view back into the community. And you're not going to please everyone.
No.
That was the lesson I learned when I was, not much older than you. You can't please everyone all the time. So that means that there are occasionally difficult choices.
Yeah. You've previously mentioned the transport issues. What way would you try and resolve this within Baines?
I think some describe Bath as the biggest roundabout in Europe. There's a lot of traffic coming through here, and one of the main aims, I think, from Baines' point of view, is to achieve a reduction in that traffic coming in and out of the city on its way to somewhere else. So to that end, we're hoping to get a connection between the A46 and the A36, the Warminster Road.
Yeah.
And I think that there's been opposition to that, and I think we've really got to try and drive that forward. There's support and there's opposition, and there's various arguments about where both sides come from, but I think that's a major one. The second one is ideally we do quite well with the park and rides on two sides of the city, and to have a third one would seem to make sense to me. And the precise location of that or how it's organised, I think that's something that we should look into in this forthcoming period when hopefully the Conservative Party will be running the council and we can drive forward some good and sustainable change.
Okay.
What do you think about Baines students striking from school to raise their views and concerns about climate change and to protect the environment?
I think it is great that people have views and opinions that they're prepared to stand up for. There's a phrase to say, don't stand up for anything you're not prepared to be knocked down for. Students leaving school and doing their thing, I'm slightly conflicted on that. I think on balance, I wouldn't wish to encourage people to leave school and protest, waving placards every time they think they don't like something. But at the same time, I think for children and young adults of all ages to express their opinions and to make them heard in the best way, that should be encouraged. They're learning, and it's part of the learning process. So I found myself semi-caught up in the edge of the march, actually, in Queen Square. And I'm thinking, what should I do now? But yeah, so overall, I'm supportive. I would just urge to be careful when people choose to do these things.
Do you think this is the right thing for young people to do when raising awareness? Or is there another way forward?
I think, again, you've got to ideally strike a balanced view there. Can these things be done out of school hours? Children are meant to go to school to learn. Full stop.
Yeah.
That's what school and that's what colleges and universities are there for. And that's the greatest gift in life. If you can learn, that should really be your aim, to learn as much as you can and head forward. Then that gives you the capacity to do good things. What's not to like? But there's a lot to learn. One of the main things for me now is the more I know, the less I know. And I love continuing to learn. So I think that should be encouraged in children and young adults. And within that, yes, get your opinions. Usually they tend to be a little more black and white when people are younger. That's understandable. The nuances come with experience. Not necessarily with age, but with experience.
Yeah. So there's obviously quite a significant amount of cuts happening all over the country in several different services. The NHS being severely affected by this. What is your view on the fact that half of the 11,482 children who are needing treatment for their mental health had to wait more than 18 weeks following their initial assessment to be treated?
That sounds to me like it's too long. And I think there's been quite a bit of extra, well, I know there's been quite a bit of extra investment by the government into the NHS, and that is ongoing. NHS England asked for a certain amount, and the government actually gave more. There's always a slight danger with political parties promising, and it can ramp up. There's one pie to spend, and you have to decide how to spend that pie. So there's difficulties there. Mental health issues should take some parity, in my view, and I believe it is. I have a number of friends that are consultants on both sides of the mental health side and A&E and surgery side. So I hear quite a bit of those arguments, and I think the aim is for there to be greater parity. There should be greater parity. Actually achieving that is a challenge sometimes, because people's approach to mental health is often, if you break your arm, you go and get it fixed.
Yeah.
If areas in your mind are not working correctly, you should go and get it fixed.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. It's one and the same thing in many cases. In other cases, of course, there's different nuances to understand. It's not quite as apparent as an arm flopping around.
Yeah.
The brain is a very complicated thing.
If we're going on to the issue of homelessness now, what measures would you put in place to tackle the issues of homelessness in Bath?
Now, do you mean homelessness or rough sleeping? And would you like me to define the difference?
Yes, please.
There is a difference. Rough sleepers are those that choose to sleep on the streets. Homeless people don't have perhaps a contract to live in a house, or they may be sofa surfing. And, many of us have been students and sofa surfed in the past. But all those are classed as homeless. And it's the council's job to house them where they can, and they often do. Now, I should be careful of bouncing back the question. The number of rough sleepers in Bath, have you any idea how many there are?
No.
There's around 20.
Oh.
Okay.
So, and I actually know a fair amount about this. In Britain, there's anything from 5,000 to 10,000, I think, if I really made it simple, depending if you're looking at charities that are claiming this, which might well be right, or government figures on one night they would take figures. And that's about, well, put it like this. In France, there's about 7 times as many. In Germany, there's about 8 times as many. In the USA, there's about 10 times as many rough sleepers. And never mind the southern sort of European states. So I do think they should be, it should be sorted to have down to an absolute minimum. At the same time, in Bath, I think we do pretty well. And that doesn't mean to say we shouldn't keep on pushing.
No.
With homeless people, there's many other challenges there of providing accommodation for folk and getting them out from B&Bs and into having a standard contract where they can afford to pay it. I hope that answers that one. I did. Forgive me. I'm doing an Open University thing on criminology and psychology, and that was one of my essays last year. So I had to really gen up on it, and I got quite into it.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. And all these things are about often about public perception.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't it be? Not many people have the time to look into these things or have an essay hanging over their heads where they've got to really gen up on things. So I think it's important to use opportunities like this, if you like, to inform people.
Yeah.
Because the facts of the matter, you can play with statistics a lot. Of course you can. But often they have to come from facts.
Yeah.
Okay. Hope that answered that one well enough.
Yeah. So, obviously, leading on from that and talking about sofa surfing, what would you like to do to tackle the lack of affordable housing available within Bath?
Well, I think this Conservative administration that is now at the end of its time, the last 4 years, I think we've got 267% more houses that are affordable than we needed to have in this last 4-year period, which is pretty good. And the vast majority of those are on brownfield sites. And I think that is really good. And that doesn't mean to say there shouldn't be more. And the way that I'd like to think, the way I've looked at it and studied it before I joined in, if you like, it's using the experience of the councillors that you bring in and you encourage to stand. And sometimes it's their business experience, sometimes it's their experience in social areas to try and get affordable and good solutions. And sometimes that has to be a balance of business against a social need. So I think we're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean to say we can't keep on pushing.
Do you think that parts of Bath which are aimed at tourists are prioritised over the more rural areas?
That's an interesting question. Prioritised. I don't know quite how I can answer that. I think the tourists will come and visit the most beautiful parts of the city or the most historical parts of the city. And patently, I would say it's the owners of those sites, whether that's partly the council or private individuals trying to advertise things. It's their job to show off something that is bringing business. As far as the council is concerned, I think we have about 5 million people come to visit Bath, and they spend money in the city. And and everyone invariably benefits from that. And so therefore, of course, you need to concentrate on those areas to some degree, which shouldn't be at the expense of other areas that need attending to. And you have to strike a balance. And again, sometimes that does create difficult choices, because if one creates more money, then you can use that money to in other areas.
Yeah, you touched on it partially then, but do you feel that the tourists are beneficial to Bath, and if so, what ways especially?
Well, I think if people bring, we've all wandered around Bath when it's been heaving with tourists, and we all probably raise our eyes slightly when you're trying to get from A to B. At the same time, they bring a lot of kudos to Bath and a lot of money to Bath, and that encourages the art scene. And so overall, I would say yes, they are an advantage. And if that creates some minor difficulties, sometimes I think that's more than worth it.
Do you think that Bath would be able to cope without the tourism industry?
Oh, I think it will be able to cope, because there are many areas around the country and the world that doesn't have tourism. And there's a number of businesses here in Bath, and they would continue whether there were tourists here or not. So, yes, people will survive. People in this country and in this city are very full of innovation, and that's business. And it's business that makes things work. They pay taxes and they employ people that pay taxes, and it's those taxes that create the pie. Yeah. To be spent on stuff. So it's often down to business to create the wealth that is then spent by government, whether that's local government or national government.
Yeah. So leading on from taxes, obviously the recent council tax bills have been released, and people have noticed quite a significant increase. What do you think is the reasoning behind that? And
well, I'm very happy to advertise that I think Bath and North East Somerset had the second lowest increase in the whole of the southwest. So there is inflation involved, and so things have to go up, and there are difficulties for local councils whereby the national government decreased the subsidy, and so therefore they have to make savings. But I think we made, something like, I think it was £267 million worth of savings in the last period, and we were left with a bit of a shortfall of 1.7 million, I think it was. So you have to, in the best way you can, balance your books. Sometimes if you can borrow money cheaply, then that's useful. And sometimes, yes, you do have to tax people for the services you provide. But if you're having the second lowest increase, that's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And obviously I'm biased, but I'd like to think if we continue to run it in an efficient way, then we'd be looking to keep that council tax as low as we can within reason, without sort of not assisting the areas that we need to assist.
Yeah. Because obviously in the smaller villages where they have parish councils, do you feel that they kind of detract from the value of the local councillors?
They detract from the value of the local councillors? I'm not quite with you there.
The parish councillors and the local councillors don't work together as much. They work as separate teams.
Well, I take your point, and at the same time I think my view would be, as a prospective councillor, is that people should work together where they can. Yeah. And I mean that on the political divide as well. I think people have to work together. There's a recent example where we have been working with the Liberal Democrats in council on some of the climate change issues, and I think I'm all for that. There's little point in polarisation. We've had enough of that. And so, yes, I for one would wish people to work together better. And if that means encouraging people down at the parish councils to work together better, then that's as it should be.
Okay. Why do you feel that we should vote for you on the elections on the 2nd of May?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. I think Bath is booming at the moment. You can see that when you just got to look around. And some of the statistics and facts that we can put forward as being independently verifiable indicate that we are doing very well in the southwest and doing better than we have done in the past. 90% of the schools are good or outstanding now, and it's risen. And so things are getting better and booming. And I'd like to think that a large proportion of that was down to the administration being able to push its ideas forward under Conservative leadership. And therefore, I think people should vote Conservative to allow that to keep going. To keep it going. And it's about local stuff. Some people will worry about the national issues, as they should do. But this place has got to keep going, and it's got to keep itself, not got to, but it should take the best opportunity to keep its local services and its local attractions going in the best way it can. And therefore it needs the most efficient council and the best run and well-led council that it can have. And to split that and to have it half and half, in my view, wouldn't work as well.
No. You briefly mentioned the schools in that there. Obviously, this school is unfortunately being closed down.
Yes.
Under the current Conservative government. Is there anything...
Well, be a little careful of that, because it's not anything to do with the Conservative government that it's closing, or indeed the local council, as you might be aware.
Yeah.
It's down to the, as I understand it, it's the levels of people at the school and some other factors, but I don't think it's anything to do with government, national or local.
Although the funding to the education services was cut significantly, do you not think that this could have had an impact on...
Well, that is a difficult question, and it's your job to ask me difficult questions. I think there has been austerity over the past years, and that has eased in this last shorter period, and Britain is indeed seemingly booming, with very low unemployment and high employment, and therefore more taxes coming in, and therefore more money to spend. And actually, if you look at the spending that the last national government has had, it's pretty high compared to others even. Has there been some areas in education which could have done with more money? I'm sure everyone can always do with more money. It's a question of how you choose to spend the pie that you have. Whether that would have affected here is, I think, for me at this stage, too difficult to say. I think that when I've looked at the facts of the matter as I've seen it, it's been a little more down to the level of people at the school not, sadly, making that sustainable. And yes, I read it with sadness, to be honest, but as I also read it, it wasn't anything to do with the local council or the national government. And that would have been the same had someone else been in charge of any political party, I sense.
Yeah.
Before we come to end, is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't yet covered?
I mean, I'd love to know your views, but I don't know on how you found it, interviewing people of different persuasions, and how much you've learnt from that.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting experience by interviewing such a wide variety of candidates and seeing everyone's different opinions. It's definitely been quite eye-opening to see the different views that people from the different parties have.
And as I said, it's a learning experience here. And, I think I've said all that I was happy to say on the questions you gave me, and we can sit for hours and talk about stuff. But it's brilliant that you're in here learning and also getting views about stuff, because there's a lot to learn, and it's really I put it to you: get out there and learn more, keep on learning. It's brilliant, and I thank you for your questions and time.
I can quickly ask, how do you think you could encourage younger people to get more involved with local politics?
Well, gosh, I'm so tempted to bounce that back at you, but I would love to get young people. We've got quite a few young people in the local party, and that's as it should be. We had volunteers out helping deliver leaflets and so on, and that's really good to see. And I think I've met some others out on the stump, and I've encouraged them to join, and some are joining, and that's great. And I think that's as it should be, and trying to get people interested in politics. And I would encourage you, whichever side it is. It might not be the side I'm supporting. It's not that I don't care, but I think people need to be interested. If you are interested, you will be interesting.
Yeah.
And that applies in politics as anything else. So, yes, I actively encourage it, and I would encourage you to encourage others to take an interest. And it's, hey?
Thank you for coming in to speak with us today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
All right, and you. Lovely.
Thank
Shake
you.
your hand. Thanks very much indeed.
This has been the Bath Studio School. Thank you for watching.